We'll get started. It's 3:30, and as a good project manager, we'd like to start on time. So hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, which should be a fascinating discussion. I'm joined here by Sarah Cumming, Director of Project Management at Teleflex Medical, which is one of the U.S.'s top medical device companies. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, you started the project management office here from scratch. Can you tell me about the status of project management before you got started?
Yeah, sure. So project management here at Teleflex was certainly something that we were doing, but I would say on the project management maturity model, we were somewhat low. We were probably at about a 1.5, if I were to guess. So we were doing project management somewhat ad hoc. We had largely dependencies on the skill set of the project managers that were managing the projects. No standardized processes or tool sets or approach to project management.
All right. So you and your boss had a lot of choices of people who could assist you in this process. You chose me, which is great. Tell me why. Why did you choose me?
Yeah, so for us it was really important that we had somebody who had a lot of experience in the medical device space, managing projects as well as establishing project management organizations, really knowing what were some of the best practices that were working well and what didn't work well for people, so that we could really leverage that experience as we were starting to build ours, as well as someone who could offer the training piece as we were starting off and getting up and going.
Okay. Well, that's great. It worked out really well. You set a pretty aggressive timeline. I've helped a lot of other companies do this, and they usually don't try to roll it out as fast as you did. Why did you choose to do that rather than roll it out slowly? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I think it depends on the readiness of the organization. So everyone's probably different. But for us, we were thinking about this for quite some time and something we've been talking about for years. So I think the organization was very ready for project management. And so for us, it was about trying to get in and make some changes quickly, start to get some quick wins, and really start to keep that momentum going so that people were seeing some of the successes come out right out of the gate.
Okay. You talk about successes. What would say the top 3 successes that came out of doing this whole process?
Yeah, I think the 3 biggest things for us was first alignment around what projects should people be working on, making sure that the resources were really focusing on the projects that were the top priorities for the organization and really key to the strategy, as well as alignment within projects. So people were much clearer on the expectations, the scope of projects. The teams really felt like they were rallied around the same common understanding of objective and scope of projects more than before. Another important piece for us was, of course, communication. Really having a standardized approach, standardized tool sets, standardized templates and tool sets for communicating project status and just everything about projects really helped to make sure that across the organization, everybody really understood where things were at and communication could remain pretty high on all of our projects. And I think the last piece was escalation for us. I think that in the past, there wasn't really a clear pathway for escalation. And so when issues would arise, it wasn't always clear who were you supposed to communicate to, how should I communicate this issue? And so sometimes issues would go unresolved for a period of time while teams are trying to figure out the right way to escalate those things. So now we can be much more aware of those things when they happen right away and really rally the team around making sure that we're addressing those things and not delaying projects because of risks or issues that are popping up.
Okay, good. That's great. So the PMO started off with just you as the only member, and I know that you've brought some people on board. You have how many people working?
I have 3 now. I have 2 and 3. Yep.
And did you have any difficulty bringing people on board to assist you since this was starting really from scratch?
Yeah. So I think it was really important for us because our PMOs really focused on new product development projects. We certainly support others, but that's really the primary goal in making sure that we're working on those projects that are important to the strategic objectives of our business. So finding people that had a lot of experience in taking something all the way through the product development process, especially in the medical device space, was certainly something we were looking for, and that is somewhat of a unique skill set. Not all project managers have that, as well as people that really could understand the business side of things along with the project management piece. So I wanted people that certainly had experience in managing projects in that space, not just being a part of the process. And fortunately for us, we actually had 3 people internally that had that experience. So when we did have those openings, they were able to apply, and I was very lucky to find 3 people within our organization to come on board and hit the ground running.
And you didn't have to take anyone from the outside, you had them already here. That's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
Excellent. So a project like this brings a lot of change to the organization. So tell me about the current state of project management now.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had some project management before our PMO got going. So our operations team and our IT teams did have PMO structures in place. But ours was really the first PMO for business units in kind of the new product development space. And so since we've started ours in this last year, we've started to get some short, quick wins. And I think the other business units have recognized some of the benefits that we've been realizing with our PMO in place. And so each of the business units now either is at the point of having a PMO structure formalized and in place or is very close to. So I would expect by early 2018 we're going to have formalized PMO structures in place in all of our business units.
Fantastic. And how many business units are there?
There's 5 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about like the IT? Often IT departments have their own PMO. How's that integrated with you guys?
Yeah, so we, today we have a little bit different process in the way that we do things. Certainly we worked with the operations and the IT teams as we got our processes up and going to make sure that we were understanding best practices from across the organization. Certainly we didn't want to reinvent the wheel if they had some things that were working well, so we had members from each of those groups that were a part of our team as we created things. But we still operate a little bit differently because they're more of a shared service in our organization. So when we kick projects off, we'll reach out to those teams and let them know that we have projects coming. We'll ask for someone to participate in the planning process. And once we understand what the resource needs are going to be for each of those projects, we can then work with the individual's manager to get approval for those resources and have them allocated to the projects as needed.
Okay. And I forgot to tell the audience, we'll be opening up to questions in about half an hour or so. So if you got any questions, feel free to type them up now. I can go through and scroll through it, or you can ask the questions at that time. Great. Now, I know when we started out here, I started out training you guys in the methodology that I use. But since then, you've internalized, customized it, and now understand you're rolling it out to other people within Teleflex. Tell me how that's going.
Yeah, it's going very well. So we have developed what I would say is 2 levels of training. One is certainly as you get a new group up and going, it's really important that the leadership of that organization understands what is project management, what's the benefit of project management, what's my role in project management, so somewhat of that kind of senior level, director level type training so that they understand just the high level pieces of the process and then kind of what their role is in it. So we have a program that we've rolled out around that, and then we have what I would call Project Management 101, which is really just all of the tools of the process that we're using for project management, and that's really intended for anybody who's involved in projects, whether they're going to manage projects or they're going to be a team member of projects, so that they can understand how the tools work and really understand how to give good input into the process. We've rolled that out to at least 2 of our businesses at this point, and it's gone very well. It's been very well received.
And everybody uses the same templates, so that makes it more convenient, right?
Yeah, for the most part, they're fairly standardized templates. Certainly there may be some, slight modifications that need to happen as businesses have slightly individual needs, but for the most part, somewhat standardized templates.
Speaking of templates, I know that you were starting to use some Excel spreadsheets for similar types of projects. Tell me about how that's working.
Yeah, so we use some Excel spreadsheets when we start a project off. We hold what we call a rapid planning session, where we get at least the majority of the team together as we can over a day or a couple days, depending on the size of the projects, and really take the team through the initiating of the planning process. So they work together on what's the charter, what's each of the deliverables going to be built out, from work breakdown structures all the way to hopefully by the end of the time having a pretty well-defined start on their schedules. And we've found that it's really helpful for the teams to come to those sessions with some work done, so that they've had a chance to think through a little bit about what their deliverables might be. It doesn't mean that can't change during the discussion, and they may add or take away depending on the scope that gets discussed as a part of that. But it's helpful for those team members to have a template for some pre-work. So we've created some Excel spreadsheets that are useful for them as they come in to start building out their work breakdown structures in that session. And they're electronic, so it's really easy to consolidate them and upload them into the Gantt chart then as you start building out your schedule.
Cut and paste and everything. So
Yep.
are you starting to get a lot of, as projects complete, are you getting like a bank of Excel spreadsheets that you can say, I can take a bit of this and a bit of that?
Somewhat, yeah. We haven't had a whole lot of projects that have gone all the way through the process yet, but we do have some that we're starting to reuse those templates, as well as some standardized templates that we've created based on project type that people can start with.
Oh, that's what it's all about, right? Iterate and repeat and do better. And
Yep.
excellent. So you talked about some of the successes. What were some of the difficulties you faced?
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty for me was certainly I was, as you said, one person that was assigned to this as we started off the initiative, and so really had to rely on resources within my organization from the cross-functional teams, as well as asking people, as I mentioned, from some of those other groups across Teleflex who had experience in project management to help be a part of the process of building out the templates and the methodology and the descriptions for all of that. And so, of course, those people had day jobs, and luckily, they were a group of resources that were very, very passionate about project management and really enthusiastic about the process. And so they were really committed to being a part of the process and helped me to build out those templates.
Good.
Yeah.
And you set a pretty aggressive timeline. How'd you do?
We actually came in a little bit ahead of schedule. So our goal was, as I mentioned, we were probably at about a 1.5 from initial assessments of our maturity on the maturity model. Our goal was to be at a 3.5, 6 months after we started our implementation, and we were at about a 3.7, so a little bit ahead of schedule for our goal.
How'd you do on budget?
We came right in on budget.
So it can be done, folks. It's possible to get this done in 6 months. Excellent. Now, while this was going on, if this wasn't enough, I know you also, in parallel, were doing a prioritization process.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to prioritize all of the different projects and programs you had. Tell me about that. How did that go?
Yeah, so when we first started off the prioritization process, we worked across the organization, asked all the groups, to give us each of the projects that they believed were active projects they were currently working on as our starting point, and I got back a list of about 150 projects. And so the first step, of course, was to get the leadership team together for a day workshop where we, put up all of those projects on the wall and worked through, which ones really were critical to making sure they were aligned to our strategy for the business unit. At the end of that day, about an 8-hour session, we got to a project list of about 40. And then from there, it was really trying to understand what was the resource capacity in the organization to get that list down to the right sizable list for us. We've landed at about 20 projects pretty consistently now through the last year that we've been working on.
And now, do you find people are more focused on these important projects?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really helped people to understand, what is the prioritization, how does it fit into the overall strategy, and making sure that, if they're across a couple different projects, they know, where they should spend their time, especially if on one of their projects they have some items that are on the critical path, they understand they need to focus on those first before they move on to tasks that might be on subsequent projects.
Yeah. And I know it's still early on, but do you predict that they'll finish a lot faster than they were finishing before you put this process in place?
Yeah, hopefully. So hopefully speed is a part of it. It's a little early to tell, I think, as far as that. Really, we've been very focused in this initial implementation in making sure that we're just being more consistent in our approach to things and making sure that we're delivering upon the commitments that we put out. So we're really measuring ourselves against how are we doing on those types of metrics. But I think absolutely as we get better and we continue to evolve, speed is always something I know that we're trying to do, and certainly every project's always under the gun to get faster and deliver quicker than they can. So we'll be looking at how do we evolve in the next year to maybe adapt some technologies or approaches that will help us do that.
So you did a lot of things to put the PMO in place. I just want to make sure we get it all. So we talked about the prioritization process. We talked about actually creating the PMO, hiring people, creating all these templates and tools. In addition to that, one of the major things you put out was this project management guide, 100 pages with all of the steps you need to start from the beginning and get to the end of a project, all of the role descriptions, etc. So a lot of parts to that. How's that working out? Tell me about the process going through that and then using it currently.
Yeah. I think it's a great resource, and I think it's a really important tool for us to put project management in the context of how we do business in our business unit, and even within the business units and new product development processes. It was, as I said, it was a very thorough process that we went through, and I think it was really the best practices of certainly all the standard project management tools that are out there. So we didn't reinvent the wheel by leveraging, the things that are in the PMBOK and other spaces that are out there today, as well as I mentioned the best practices that maybe existed within Teleflex, but really wanted to take a look at how did we consolidate and combine those things into things that worked best for us. And it's really a go-to resource. I get asked a lot from across the organization for where to find it and to send it to people so that they can take a look through it.
Okay. And I remember when I was creating these 20 years ago, it was a book with forms and everything. Now it must be all electronic, right? How are people using it?
Yeah, so I think it's a great resource, as I said, for somebody who's new to understand the context of how we do project management here. It's a good tool if somebody's brand new to project management. They might read the guide from start to finish. But if somebody's fairly new or fairly experienced with project management, I think it's a nice resource that they can just read specific sections. So if they're not quite sure how we do prioritization or how to use a specific tool, they can just flip to that part of the guide and read that one section. So what I like about it is you don't really have to read it start to finish, and the fact that it's 100 pages then hopefully is a little less overwhelming for people.
Now, one of the things we did with you, and every time I roll this out at different companies, somebody adds something to it. One of the things you guys added was the idea of what do I do if I'm this person, and then how do I which pages do I read, which sections do I read? Did you find that has helped the audience out?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a nice flow chart for them to say, if I need to answer this question, where do I begin? And as I said, a little tool that can help them be a little less overwhelmed by the fact that it is 100 pages and knowing where to start.
Yeah. So I know this is version 1 of the project management guide. What's in your mind for version 2 of that? What would you like to change?
Yeah, so I think version 2 is really going to be dependent on where project management goes from here within the business units. So as I mentioned, really starting to work with each of the leads that are being put in place for the other project management groups across the business units. And we're starting to talk about as a group now, what are the elements that we want to make sure all the business unit project management teams are using, what tools, what parts of the methodology, and are there things that we've learned that we maybe need to adjust and modify to make sure that they fit a little bit better. So definitely working towards a version 2 that we anticipate to come out in probably the early part of next year.
Okay, excellent. One of the things I liked about the way you set that up was you didn't just make it an insular your business unit working on this guide, and nobody else got to see that you had people from other business units, you had people from some of the shared services involved. Tell me about that. How did that work out?
Yeah, it worked out really well. As I said, I think the ability to really see what was working across other parts of Teleflex, especially since we had these other project management groups that had already been in place for some time, they had some things that were working really well, and I think it was a great opportunity for us to make sure we were learning from them, as well as people who are pretty experienced in project management within the business units and understanding how project management fit with some of our other projects or processes, as it related to new product development, was very helpful to get their perspective on all of that. So, we are working across that group as well on how do we start to harmonize some of those pieces as we look to the future. It's probably a little bit longer term thing for us. We're first trying to focus on how we align things within the business unit, since we have pretty similar processes within the new product development world, but also thinking about across those other groups, how do we start to harmonize some of the things that we're all working on together.
So now they're taking, those people are now taking the lead in their own business units to come up with something that's close.
Yep.
And I noticed as we went through the process that you didn't make it very specific to your business unit. It seemed like it could be easily just used by the other business units? Is that what you're finding, that they're using it almost as is, or are they?
I think it'll be a starting point. I definitely think that that's most people's feeling is it's a good starting point. The thing about the business units that is unique is, we're separate business units so that if there are slight differences in the way we do business or approach things, we can make those adjustments as we need to. So we may find there are, one or two areas where, we just have slightly different approaches to things, and we may need to make sure that things align to those processes differently across the businesses. But really trying to focus on, what parts of the process can we harmonize on, and we definitely think that there will be a lot of opportunity.
So what do you see in the future for that? Is it going to be one guide for all of Teleflex, or is there going to be one for each business unit?
I think in the short term, we'll probably see, one guide for each of the business units, but maybe longer term, one that works across all.
Okay. And the other thing that's unique about Teleflex is that you have these shared services that are shared across all the business units. So how does that affect the resource allocations to projects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the resource allocation piece has worked pretty well when we engage with those departments in the early planning stages. Once a project gets initiated, we reach out to them and ask if they can participate in that rapid planning session. Those resources come in and then help define what are all the deliverables and activities required for their part of the project, and then we'll take that back to their manager and have a discussion about how much time is resources available in that group. Is it that resource? Maybe it's another resource, depending on timing and availability within the group, and making sure that we can then fit it within the schedules of the projects.
Okay. And I know the hardest thing, all the companies that help do this, the hardest thing is getting that resource allocation working right. Mm-hmm. Figuring out what everyone's working on and splitting it up between non-project work and real project work, and then making sure that they're not overloaded. Mm-hmm. So how do you do that when you've got shared services that are working in your project, but they're also working on other business units' projects? How does that work out?
Yeah. So for most of the resources, they're within the business unit, and so in that case, it's pretty straightforward that we can plan for what amount of their time do they have available to projects versus what non-project time do they have. For those that are not within the business unit, we kind of assume that they have no availability as a starting point, and then once we work through that need based on a project perspective, we'll then go and work with their managers on what are some of the other priorities they might have, and how does our projects fit into it. And for the most part, with the shared resources, given the ebb and the flow of the project work that they have, it works out pretty well that, generally there's not a constraint there for them to be able to support the projects.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's great. So what does Teleflex think? Was the PMO project a success?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was absolutely a success.
And you're running projects more efficiently now, and you're happy?
Yes, good. Absolutely.
Let's talk about yourself now. You gained a lot of unique experience during the course of this project. Mm-hmm. What were some of the tools that you added to your tool belt?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece for me was the change management piece. Okay. Certainly I'd been a part of a lot of large changes, but really thinking through how do we get people excited about this, and really understanding the value and the benefit of the project management organization. And so really, how do we make sure we're communicating that throughout all levels of the organization, and continuing to make sure that message is getting out to people. So really building out that change management piece and having a plan in place was relatively new for me.
Okay. Do you think it would be valuable to have a change management class added to this whole process? Just because I know there's people out there. I've been trained. I've gone through change management training, and I find it very valuable. I feel like I need to know enough to actually teach people as part of these things. So do you think that would be valuable to add change management?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, even a change like this, although very positive, it's still change. People were very excited about it, and like I said, there was a lot of enthusiasm and positive momentum behind it, but you still have to change the way you're doing things, and so having a tool set for that would be very helpful.
Great. So before this started, you were in the marketing department, right? Mm-hmm. Now you are in the project management department. Was it a good career move? Are you happy you did it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, I, as a past engineer, it was also a project manager at another organization, and as I said, spent a lot of time in marketing. So project management is something I was very passionate about for many years, had seen in other organizations the benefit that it brings and really the value that it could offer. And so, I think that being able to be a part of kind of sharing that enthusiasm here and helping people to understand the value that it could bring to the organization was a very exciting opportunity for me.
Great. Would you recommend this as a career step to others?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So what is it about you that made this transition a success?
Yeah, I think that certainly, as I said, I had a lot of passion for it, and I think passion and hard work when you're starting something new like this is always beneficial. But I think that a lot of it was also the experience that I brought to it. Being a former engineer and a project manager certainly helped in being able to understand how to set up the processes and really what works from a new product development perspective. Spent a lot of time, as you said, in marketing as well, and so really understanding the strategy piece and how project management would not just help us be better at doing projects, but it's really a valuable piece of making sure that we're executing on the right strategies for the business unit and really being that partner for the business in executing on our strategies. So I think having that business background was really an important piece for me to help bring that to the organization.
Okay. And you're glad you made the move, so.
Definitely.
Good. So I've asked a whole bunch of questions. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up? Anything else you feel like I haven't asked?
No, I think we've covered it all.
Good. Well, there's probably some questions in the audience, so let's see if you guys have anything here. I'm going to figure out how to see what the questions. And if you like, I can unmute you. And all right, so I see some questions here. Wow. Bear with me for a moment while I figure out how to do one line at a time. All right. Got a question here from Brian asking, could you share the Excel spreadsheet templates that you use to help frame a project?
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely.
We'll do that, and Sarah will email that to me. I'll put this up here on the site. A completed example, scrubbed for confidentiality, would be most beneficial. Came from Brian Brooks. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll take care of that for you, Brian. Good. What software systems do you use to guide, document, and control PM activities?
Yeah, so we are, I would say, somewhat in a manual approach right now. So we use Microsoft Project for schedules primarily. I would say there are probably a few people in the organization who don't have access, so they may even be using Excel for establishing their schedules. But really, that's I would say the predominant software system that we're using. A lot of our reporting and documentation is going into just your typical, Word type programs or PowerPoint or Excel type templates that we've created. We thought it was really important right now that we really get a standardized approach in place and kind of learn to walk before we run a little bit here. So later phases, we'll be looking at bringing in maybe more technology around the project management process. And there's a lot of different tools out there that can help you do that. But we thought it was important that we just really be systematic in our process as we really got going here. And so we're just using what I would say is much more of a manual approach at this point.
Now, Brian also asked if you can share the project management guide that you created, and I'm kind of hoping the answer is no, because
yeah.
I get a lot of, I make my living by helping people with their project management guide. I'd be very happy to help you with yours. And this is something that kind of needs to be customized anyway.
Yes.
I do come to a company with a generic version that we work together with a team to customize to make sense for that company. And I'm sure since you guys spend a lot of money on it, you don't want to let it away either. Would that be true?
That's very true.
All right, next question. What has been your biggest challenge during this implementation, and how did you overcome?
Yeah, so I think it's really been just, as I said, that making sure that change management piece was, kind of continually managed. I think that, although again, this was a very positive change for us, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, and everybody was on board, and it was something that when you would tell people, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this approach we're taking, everybody was like, okay, great. We've been wanting to do this for so long, so. There was certainly no resistance, but it's still changed, and there's still a lot of different impact on the way people were doing things previously that you have to think through. And so I think making sure that you're constantly working through how that's going to work with all parts of the organization, from the leadership team on down to the project teams, was really not a negative challenge, but was just really the challenge that we had to constantly make sure we were keeping in front of us and managing.
Okay. Another question: what didn't work, and what would you do differently to avoid that from happening?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges we're still having is honestly the resource loading piece. And that's something that, as you said, I think a lot of people struggle with. Because we are certainly very manual in our approach right now, it's it's a nice snapshot of where you're at today every time you update that information, but then it's old as soon as you get the information almost. And so we've developed some better ways, I think, of looking at that data than maybe when we started, but it's still not ideal, and it takes a lot of work for people to report that data. So. And
you don't have time reporting?
Not right now, yeah. So that's, I think, as we look to the future, if we were to get a little bit more automated tools in some of the approach that we take, we might be able to get to a little bit better calculation of some of those.
That's really tough. A lot
yeah.
of Excel spreadsheets.
Exactly.
We can, right?
Yep.
All right. What do you look for when hiring a project manager into the PMO group?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, as I said, I think for our group specifically, because a large part of what we're doing is those new projects or new product development projects, it's really important that the person coming in understands the whole process of what does it take to get something all the way from an idea into our customers' hands. Because it's really the project manager who's helping the team to think through where are some of the risks and some of the things that we need to watch out for throughout that entire process, and knowing what questions to ask the team to help think through all of that. So, somebody who was experienced in that and experienced in project management was really the ideal person for me.
So you like to get a technical leader and project manager wrapped up in one? Okay.
Ideally, yes. Yeah.
Good. See what else. What is the optimal amount of projects for a project manager?
Well, that really depends on the project you're on. So that's where planning out the project and understanding what is going to be even the project manager's resource allocation to that project comes into play. And I think that's something people ask me all the time, and it really is going to vary on each of the size of the projects. So sometimes you can only manage one because you have a very large project that might have a lot of complicated parts to it. Other times you might have a smaller project that's only taking 20 or 30% of your time, and you might be able to manage a couple projects there.
My answer to that question is, even if it's small projects and even if they're not all going on at once, some projects are kind of in a lull while you're working on other projects. I really don't think you should manage more than 5, and that's if they're small and they're not all going on at the same time. So there is a practical upper limit, I think. Mm-hmm. All right, next question. How are you convincing others of the PMO's value?
Yeah, so that's something that we right out of the gate, and especially in working with Bruce, established some metrics for the project management organization, within my team that we measure. So showing that we actually were making an impact on projects and being a little bit more consistent in the way that we were managing some of the key metrics that were important to the business. And we report those on a regular basis on all of our projects. So making sure that those were being captured and being communicated across the organization has really helped people to understand the impact that we're having.
Okay. I noticed on the questions that Hamam, you asked if you just said, I have one question. I'm not sure if you want me to unmute you to ask the question or not. So I'll be looking through the scroll bar, seeing if you want me to unmute you. Otherwise, you can type in your question. But meanwhile, we have another question about how big is the PMO compared to the size of the business unit that you're supporting?
Yeah, so I think as far as the business unit, we're about we're 4 people, I guess, on my team, and business unit wise, we're maybe a little north of 100 people.
Okay.
So.
And I imagine the follow-up question is that the right number? Do you feel like you need more?
Right.
Obviously, you are not the only people. The project managers in your PMO are not the only people managing projects within your organization. So how's that working out?
Yeah, so I think for us, what we've had to do is take what we call a hybrid approach. And so, I have the 3 people on my team, as I mentioned, and they're really focusing on the projects that are those large projects that maybe require somebody a little bit more dedicated to them, and really those that are at the top of strategic importance to our business unit. Then we ask people from across the organization to step up and lead some of the other projects on our list. So as I said, we've got about 20 projects, and having 20 dedicated project managers will probably never be something we'll be able to do. So we leverage people from across our marketing organization or our technical organization that have skill sets in project management to step up and lead some of those projects.
Okay. Now, I believe that all of the project managers in your organization are PMPs. Is that a requirement?
It was not a requirement. It was certainly a nice to have, and something that I encouraged my team to do and supported them to do. And they all took their exam this year and passed on their first try. So it was an awesome accomplishment.
And why do you think it's a nice to have? What's the advantage of having some of this stuff?
Yeah, I think that it shows you really understand, project management. You really understand, how everything works together in the, really, important parts to pay attention to in project management. It's not just, all schedules and Gantt charts and templates. It's really much more than that. And I think it's really important that they understand all of those pieces so that they can be those, as I said, those resources to making sure that we're being a part of delivering the key parts of the strategy for the business.
Okay, excellent. All right, next question. Nice to see you too, Chris. Do you do some pilot projects? I guess, did you do some pilot projects when you set up the PMO?
Well, setting up the PMO was a project.
Yeah,
so
we
ran it just like a project. So, we started right out of the gate in putting together a charter and working through a work breakdown structure and putting together a detailed project plan. And so I think that was the best way to start to show people the value of the tools and the process was to run the establishing of the PMO just like a project. So it was a project and successful.
And it was a short project, so you
right.
could see the end result.
Yep.
I know at the same time we also planned some other projects.
Yes.
Using the same methodology. How are those coming along? Did those finish yet?
Yeah, so we did have an opportunity to plan one start to finish, and it was actually another very short project that got going about the time that we launched the PMO. And it was great because it was a project where we had a product on back order and we really needed to figure out a solution pretty quickly. So it was really, I would say, the first project that was outside of the PMO project that we got to take all the way through the process. And we quickly, got a team in place to do the rapid planning session that we've talked about, and got to a nicely defined plan pretty quickly, and the team executed in about a 3-month span on that project, and it was a very big success for us. So
that's one of the things I always say at the end of my project management training classes is, pick the right people, train the right people, pick some projects, make sure they succeed, and then publicize the successes. Is that the process you've been using?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because with change management, we want to know is, you're going to make me do all these things. I've been doing it this way. Now you want me to do it that way. Why should I do it? What's the payback? And now you can show them, this is what happens.
Yep.
Right. Good. Excellent. Next question, Rachel. How do you decide which projects are managed by the PMO and which are not?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Rachel, and honestly something that we have struggled with a little bit through the course of the project management rollout here, because we try to focus, as I said, on new product development projects, but that's not always a clear line. So there's new products that are brand new, and then there's line extensions and material changes and those things that just come up in the day-to-day business that are projects, but they're not necessarily all that we can take on, because those start to be a lot of projects that occur in the organization. So we've been trying to separate out and be very intentional, again, to what are those projects that are helping us to execute on the near-term strategy for the business, versus what are those projects that we just have to do more of those, those sustaining type or those iterative type projects that they have to happen, but maybe aren't necessarily something that have to come into the PMO. And so those are managed by a different group. They're not managed by my group, but we work very closely together so that there's a lot of communication between those two groups. And if there is something that comes up in one of those groups that needs to be escalated to our leadership team, I can bring it to them to make sure that they're aware of anything that's happening there.
Okay. And does any of that have to do with some of your project managers or technical leads in certain areas? If that type of project comes up, does that tend to come to them, or does that have something to do with the priority of the projects during this come into play?
It can, yeah. We do have, the way we're structured a little bit, we do have some different resource pools, and so sometimes that can come into play, that a project just may naturally fit with one of those resource pools, and so it makes sense for them to take it on. And sometimes, yeah, prioritization absolutely comes into play as well.
Do you need any more people working for your PMO?
Always could use more people working for the PMO.
All right. Next question. What authority and responsibility does the project manager have over the project, i.e., can the project manager pull more resources into the project without approval from the affected group's manager?
No.
Okay.
We do, yeah. So we're much more, as Bruce said, a matrix organization. And so what happens is, as the team goes through that rapid planning process and they understand what their plan looks like and how many resources they need for their project, they bring that back to our steering committee, and the steering committee then approves their project plan and the resources and budget and everything that they've requested for that project to go forward. If there's a change to any of that, it's considered a scope change, and so they need to bring that back to the steering committee to request approval for that change.
Okay, good. Next question. Hard to see this. What you guys aren't seeing is that I get like one line at a time from these questions. I haven't figured out how to extend this buck. All right, next question from Marshall. What do you do when the senior management doesn't have project management maturity?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that we felt were pretty important as we structured our PMO here to try to help that a little bit. One was that I'm on the senior management team, so I report directly to the president of our business unit, and that's very similar to the structure that's happening in some of our other business units. So the directors of the PMOs are all reporting directly to the president. So that helps for you to bring that voice and that experience to that team, and you can kind of help in some of those discussions at that level, make sure they understand the process. We also, as I said, did do some of those trainings with that team, which was helpful for them to understand at a high level what is the project management process, and even maybe more importantly, what was their role in the project management process. And it's something that you may need to do a couple times with that group and approach a couple different topics with them to make sure that they're getting that training.
And you guys, often when I come in a company to do this, there's one or two people who really are my champions. They want to have this this project management process put in place, and you've got these other guys who are like, I'm not interested. You got to fight me the whole way. You guys didn't have that.
We didn't.
Had a pretty broad approval by all of your senior management, from quality to regulatory, marketing, R&D. Everybody really was behind the process, which made your job a lot easier. So
absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So I don't think we really have that low project management maturity here. All right, next question by Brian. Who do you, as Director of PMO, report into? I guess you just answered that question.
Yep. Yeah, I report directly to the president of our business unit.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that is the end of the questions, unless you guys want to type anything in here, or if you want to raise your hand, which I believe I can see. Yes, I can see if somebody raises their hand. Then I can unmute you, and you can ask a question live. So we'll hang out here for a few more minutes, and if not, then we'll call it a day and end this a few minutes early. All right. Well, I I think we had a great discussion. We got some great questions and good answers for everybody. So what's next for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think really it's continuing to elevate our project management maturity here and really thinking about how do we start to build upon some of the success we've had and get better at our approach to things and, as I said, maybe even start to automate some of the things we're doing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, best of luck, Sarah. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you. So thank you.
Thank
for the
you.
interview.
Thanks
Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll call it a day.